Now that's significant. The Market Research Podcast.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us on this latest episode of Now That's Significant, a market research podcast. This is your host, Michael Howard, the Head of Marketing at InfoTools. Today, we're joined by Lynn Pellicano, Senior Market Research Manager at Simon Kucher and Partners, who are regarded as the world's leading pricing advisor and thought leader and have over 1,600 consulting professionals worldwide. Thanks for joining us on the show, Lynn.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure, and thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. So, Lynn, what's the most significant thing you're going to tell us today?
Well, this is an issue I know that you've talked about on the podcast before, and that's around the quality of our sample. We all know that poor data quality is really endemic across the industry. And personally, I think that B2B suffers the most. It's a significant issue and it still needs to be talked about because there's no one single way to fix it.
Indeed. So to get us started then, what's the current state of the sample quality that we deal with? What's caused this drop in quality from your perspective?
So there's a lot of things. Personally, I think double opt-in panel is no longer sufficient for niche B2B audiences. Sure, it's fine for very broad audiences like ITDMs, HRDMs, on high-level industry-wide topics. But the second you start to talk about a niche product serving a niche audience, it becomes problematic. Self-selection bias, in particular, becomes an issue. And this in itself is why it's so important to have a buttoned-up screener. And you'll hear me say that a lot in this podcast. I strongly believe in having a really strong survey screener. So as a result, we're forced to look at different methods to help solve for this. That includes things like custom recruitment via business databases and phone interviewing. And yes, I do believe that phone is back. I never thought I'd hear myself say that, but it really is. In addition, verified online panels or expert networks are now in the mix too. I think gone are the days of cheap sample. Now we need to really pay more money for quality, particularly as it pertains to niche B2B. Or at the end of the day, you're just going to be stuck cleaning your data and never focusing on insights.
Which is not a good thing, being in the insights industry. So is it such an issue that we can't just get around it by simply cleaning up the sample a little before letting our researchers dig into the data?
So I've helped teams with surveys where I've seen as high as an 80% clean out rate. Wow. The project has been in field for 2 weeks, and we need to present recommendations to the client next week. There's no way that we can backfill in that short of a time. I'd love to say that timelines are long and that we have all the time in the world, but the reality is we don't. We're beholden to the timelines our clients put on us. They have board meetings that they need to present recommendations to. So at the end of the day, no, we can't just rely on cleaning up our sample, especially when you're seeing removal rates this high.
Well, that's amazing. And then when you look at the effective fee or remuneration for each of the effective or the clean sample, that's significantly higher, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So what are some of the other challenges that those in the B2B space are facing when it comes to market research and collecting some survey sample?
So I think about a webinar that one of our research partners gave, I think last year, EMI Solutions, and they actually do a lot of research on research. One of the reasons we consider them a strong partner. And they literally looked at their data and told us things that we need to do to improve our sample and improve the insights that we're getting from our surveys. And one of those is we need to get our surveys shorter. I work in market research, in consulting, so it's a little different from traditional market research. They tend to be one-off surveys rather than long tracking surveys. And I think we have a lot of questions that we want to ask, and we don't know how to ask them simpler or shorter. The impact that a long survey can have on the quality of sample is really profound. So I think we're heading in the right direction. We're seeing on average, I think, a couple of years ago, we were at 30-minute length of interviews. Now we're getting closer to like 25. I really think we need to get it down to 15 to 20 minutes max. And that's a variety of reasons. People are busy. We need to respect their time. When you're doing market research among really high level audiences, even C-suite, they don't want to be bothered with a 30-minute survey. They're probably not getting a great incentive either, unless you're on an expert network, perhaps. But then they're usually, for a quantitative survey, expert networks tend to be on the more expensive side. So we tend to have to conduct less of them with the budgets that we have. But sure, their insights might be, a lot higher quality, but not everybody can afford to use expert networks for their quantitative surveys. So that's number one. Number two, I really think that our surveys need to be device agnostic. And by device agnostic means you can take it on a desktop, a laptop, a tablet, or a mobile device, and you have the same consistent experience across all devices. And there's obvious reasons there. I think the latest market research data suggests that somewhere around 60% of people take surveys on their smartphones. Obviously, there's a lot less real estate on smartphones, and the types of questions we're asking are only getting more complex. We need to make sure that there's a consistent experience across all of those devices, particularly mobile, in my opinion, to account for the fact that we're taking surveys on the fly. Yeah. In a B2B context, you have people that are, on the ground, contractors, people who are on job sites all day. It's really hard to get them to take surveys on desktops or laptops, because then you're asking them to complete a survey in their own time, after work, when, they're vying for attention with their families. They don't really want to be taking market research surveys at 8 p.m. at night.
True. And I think when you combine that device agnostic, the mobile, with shorter surveys, you've got someone that's on their phone taking a survey, and then they get a notification. They're dual screening possibly as well. So it has to work together, doesn't it?
Exactly. There's so many things vying for our attention that, again, asking someone to take a 30-minute survey is just not plausible anymore. And then I also really think that we need multiple recruitment methods in order to reach audiences that are not really prolific online. And I think that's particularly true for niche B2B audiences. I do think that I know that there are segments of people that you just can't get online. Financial advisors is a really good one. Often we use listed business databases to try to reach out to financial advisors. They're verified. They work at X, Y, and Z brokerage. But if you try to go on panel to get them, unless they're a verified panel, you're not going to get them, or you're going to get people self-selecting in who aren't who they say they are. And then you have a lot of quality issues that follow from there. So I think those three things: we need shorter surveys, device agnostic, and we need to reach people in multiple ways.
Cool. So the points that we've just talked about are obviously a great start. How about if we thought about this from a broader quality perspective? What could be done to improve sample, particularly pre-survey?
That's a good question. There's maybe 2-3 areas I'd like to point out. First, I think, is the recruitment method itself. And I've explained a little bit about that already. I think we need more verified methods to recruit respondents. And then I think second is the technology. And there's a lot of companies out there that have wonderful technology, the relevant IDs of the world, and the relevant competitors. These are companies that look at individual level like metadata and compare them against dozens of data points, geolocation, language, IP address, to kick out potentially fraudulent people before they even enter your survey. So that's very important, and the technology just keeps improving every single day. But I also think it's not just about fraudulent people, it's getting the right people into your survey. So I know that a lot of market research companies have their own methods on top of the technology to weed people out before they get into a survey. These are often called pre-screeners. So they're looking at behavior in their answers to very simple questions. What is your age? What is your satisfaction with X, Y, and Z? Please expand on this. So they're looking at things like open-ended responses for gibberish, things that aren't relevant to the topic, and kicking them out before they get in. So I think those are the three main ways we can help improve sample quality before we even get into a survey.
Okay. And one thing you touched on before was the importance to have a buttoned up screener. Do you want to just explain what you meant by that, and then what are some of the points of what good looks like with a button up screener?
Sure. I'm glad you brought it up. Like I said, it's something I feel very passionately about, and I help consultants with this all the time. In my opinion, the screener is one of the best defenses against poor quality data, and no amount of quality checks or data cleaning will be as effective as a screener that removes undesirable or unfit respondents, frankly. I always tell consultants, start really broad and then narrow down to your audience. Yeah. You don't want to make assumptions about the people who are starting your survey. So what does that mean? We want to always confirm screening criteria, regardless of what targeting or panel profiling may be available. That's for a variety of reasons. People's information changes all of the time, but maybe they don't update their profile on whatever panel they're registered to. I've often seen consultants make the mistake of relying on profiling data to have to avoid having to ask questions in a survey. That goes back to our surveys are long. So they're trying to figure out ways to reduce the number of questions, so they tend to rely on profiling. I'd be very, very cautious of this unless it's a super validated source. And yeah, we can talk a little bit more about the specific characteristics, but I mean, if you're thinking about just a general B2B survey, are they employed? What industry are they working in? What is their role? Do they use like a piece of software that your survey is, talking about? Are they a decision maker? Do they have enough knowledge to evaluate the product? A brand funnel even, are they aware, what's their relationship with the brand? And throughout the course of that kind of funnel, starting from really broad, then getting more specific, you're making sure that you're getting the people in there that really should be in there, rather than assuming that they should be in there.
Okay, cool. So if we think about how we can improve sample throughout the process, what can be done during the design phase?
Well, it's a lot of the stuff that I just talked about. Screener being, I think the number one thing to help us get the best quality data out there. Programming also, just the user experience. But I think that there's like inherent bias with just taking surveys in general. So if someone refuses to answer a question, that's bias in itself. There could be questionnaire design flaws. Maybe you're using inappropriate scales, poorly worded questions. That's why I always encourage teams to conduct a soft launch before they release their survey to a wider population, because it really gives you a chance to evaluate not only the quality of the data, but making sure that you're you're getting the right respondents in that your questions make sense to them. So oftentimes, if I'm seeing a high dropout rate on a question, or I'm seeing really questionable responses to a question for someone else that really should be able to answer it, to me, that indicates they're not understanding the question. So we take a number of measures in the design phase, and even at the point of a soft launch to help improve our sample quality. I think we'll get to it in a little bit, but I think that there's a lot to be said about in-field monitoring and cleaning of data as well.
Okay. Was there anything else? We talked about the screening phase before. Was there anything else that you wanted to add to that in terms of improving sample quality at that particular phase?
In the screening phase?
Yes.
No, not in particular that I can think about. It's really about the recruitment, making sure that you have robust profiled information about your respondents, and then the screening criteria to make sure you're getting the right respondents into your survey.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so then if we skip through now to real-time evaluation, during this phase, what can be done to improve sample quality?
Developing really consistent, efficient, and accurate data quality checks that clean your data of low quality respondents in real time is really important. So I think confirming your knowledge and confirming that respondents are knowledgeable about the topic, that easily could be done in the screener via different knowledge checks. We'll talk about some of those, but some of them can be, terminology. So if someone is taking, I did a study where we wanted people who took a specific project management course, and we asked them, what does this acronym stand for? And we gave them a whole bunch of different terms that if they, if they had sufficient knowledge to take the survey, they absolutely would know what the right answer is. So you can kick some people out that way. Fake brands are also another one, although I think it gets a little dicey and tricky sometimes with fake brands. I think we sometimes get carried away with our fake brands and maybe have a little bit too much fun trying to name our fake brands that they actually sound like real ones. So you really need to make sure that the brands are fictional, they don't sound similar to real brands. And I do think sometimes we need to give people the benefit of the doubt and use this as one of several checks to assess quality. I also only ever kick someone out if they say that they use a fake brand, not if they're aware, because again, it can sound like an actual real brand. At the end of the day, though, all of this is a matter of putting several inputs into a file and making sure that you check multiple of these flags. You don't ever want to remove someone just for one reason. And then I guess confirming attentiveness is the other thing. So in the screener, you're confirming knowledge and that you're appropriate to take the survey. But then I think there's also a level of attentiveness that we need to pay attention to throughout the survey. I think that the typical checks that the MR industry tends to tout the most are speeding, straight lining, bad open ends, and red herrings. And they're actually four of my least favorite. So let me tell you why. Speeding is I think number one, and I do very, very well believe that we need to be looking at this. And I don't love it because everyone's definition is different. So industry standard is remove a respondent if they complete the survey in less than 1/3 of the median. But I've conducted hundreds of studies where the content is so detailed and heavy. Here at Simon Kucher, we do a lot of work around pricing and packaging, and it really requires a lot of thought to think about some of these questions. So we've had to go over that threshold quite a bit. I also think it's important that you know your audience. If a survey has a lot of pathing, for instance, you might want to look at speeding behavior by path. I also think there's an important distinction between clients or customers. So oftentimes we'll field surveys among a client list, and then for customers, and then we'll use panel or other types of methods, custom recruitment, to get prospects into our survey. And what I think we take for granted is that people on panel take surveys a lot faster than a customer from a client list would. So you just really need to contextualize what exactly you're trying to achieve via that check, and make sure we're paying attention to it. Open-end review is another one. Again, I don't love it. Why do I care about someone putting in a none into an other specify when the rest of their answers are meaningful? I think sometimes we force responses when we don't mean to as well. So it could be a programming error. I think, sure, it can help identify bots and inattentiveness, but for me, I'm looking at consistency of responses overall more than a generic open-ended response. Straight lining is another one of them. And I think we often jump to this too quickly, and it's one of the biggest culprits of hyper cleaning. Yes, there is such a thing as cleaning too much of your data out. Just because someone straight line doesn't mean that they're inattentive. In fact, it may make sense and they genuinely feel that way. What we should look for here instead is failing multiple checks and then comparing them against the total sample.
Sure.
I'm actually demoing a tool right now from B3 Intelligence that aims to automate data quality checks by comparing responses on an individual level to trends in the aggregate data. And I thought it was really interesting. It's been getting really positive reviews internally. So I'm excited to vet that a little bit more. What else? There's red herrings. There's so many of them. And just a red herring. So please select 7 in this grid as a red herring, right? Yeah. Or what color is the sky? The sky is blue. Just because someone failed one red herring at the end of a 20-minute survey doesn't mean they're inattentive. They're tired is what they are.
Yeah.
So we need to work on shortening our surveys and making it easier for respondents to take them. 2 more that I want to talk about are numeric outliers and contradictory or improbable responses. I give this example all the time because it's actually happened to me, and it's such a great example. If I ask you how much you think is an acceptable price to spend on one cheeseburger, what would you tell me, Michael?
Well, in New Zealand, probably $7.
Okay, so when someone tells me that they're willing to pay $100 to buy a cheeseburger, I know that they're kind of, they're I don't know if you would call it gaming the system, but they're having fun giving me really improbable numbers, right? So then I really can't use them in my survey. So I have to somehow clean them out. So typically I'm looking at if they have multiple numeric open ends and we start to see a trend in the poor responses, that's a problem. Yeah. I also see contradictory or improbable, some people call them low incidence responses as well. So if I say that, and I'm getting really technical here, but it's a good illustration. If I say that my company has 1,000 employees, but my specific group has 1,500 employees, that's weird. Some people will say, oh, you should validate that. And I absolutely agree, but I do think that there's a time and a place to not validate and have some of these checks too. So yeah, those are kind of the main ones that I look at. And typically you're you're creating some sort of grid that checks the amount of flags that they fail. But I do want to caution, just as fraudulent respondents can bias data, hyper cleaning a data set can also introduce bias because it only leaves a homogeneous respondent set.
Mm.
So, and I think the other thing I'd want to point out here is just any survey respondent can become disengaged in the moment and fail a single quality check. I've done it. Removing these participants does not improve data quality. So we really want to focus on the ones that I mentioned, and making sure that you're not. I would say focus on the top 3 that matter the most to you, because I have seen data cleaning sheets that have like 40 flags, and at that point, someone is going to fail all of them, right? Or most of them, a lot of them. So focus on the ones that have the most impact or the most meaningful for your project, and don't hyper clean. I typically tend to see 10%, maybe 20% is within a normal range for removals. Anything above that, I think there's probably issues with the actual respondent pool, or there's a huge issue with your survey.
True. So I'm quite excited about another podcast coming up shortly, and that's about the value of incompletes. So it'd be interesting just to hear from your perspective, if someone is removing 50% of their sample, what impact is that having on the overall outcomes?
A lot. I mean, so by incompletes, are you talking about people who are dropping from your survey, or people that you're removing from your survey?
Well, so that particular one is dropping, but I guess you could say, but like dropping or being removed.
So usually when you see people that are dropping, it's because there could be a technical issue. That is always very, very plausible. It's too long. It's probably too long is really what it comes down to. 3, there could be the question is too difficult or takes too much effort from the respondent. Again, this goes back to keep your survey short, keep your surveys mobile agnostic, keep them simple. We want survey taking to be a fun experience. But again, at the end of the day, it's so hard. I think it's a confluence of things that we need to do to improve the quality of our surveys that we're putting out there and the quality of the people that we're recruiting into our surveys.
Well, sure. Okay, so what happens if we do nothing about this drop in quality? We just keep doing the things the way that we've always done them.
No, I don't think that works for anyone. I think there needs to be and will be improvements in all of the areas that we've discussed. I mean, there are companies popping up left and right to help solve some of these issues, many of with whom I've worked. From a panel management perspective, we need to think about how we're bringing people into our panels, but not only panel. I say panel, but I also mean, a custom recruit that involves looking at, business data, Zoom info, LinkedIn. I think anything we can do to verify respondents helps consultants and helps clients feel better about the people who are entering the survey. I also think that technology is just going to continue to improve. Technology is becoming so intelligent that I personally can't even name all the ways, all the data points that go into something like a relevant ID anymore. So I think that's great. I think they've done a great job at finding fraudulent respondents, finding the bots. There's literally like data farms out there that have become so sophisticated. They know how to, mask your IP addresses and make it look like you're in, New York City when really you're somewhere across the globe. And there's a lot of technology out there that's looking to combat that as well. I'd love for technology to get to the point where it looks at in-survey behavior. Because I don't think poor data quality equals fraudulent. I think there's a variety of things that contribute to poor quality. But yeah, I actually see that as the next kind of step where companies are trying to automate checks within surveys. And at the end of the day, no one wants to sit here and create an Excel document that, maps all of these flags to, it just takes a lot of time. So speed to insight is really important. And I think that's kind of, in my opinion, the technology is going that way as well. We're doing the best that we can pre-survey. Now we're also trying to think of innovative ways to clean our data in real time with less effort. So it's more in the moment, and we could focus less of our time on cleaning and more of our time on insights and analysis.
Oh, sure. Okay, one last little fun thought experiment, if you will. Let's imagine that we've done everything that you've talked about to clean up our sample. It's now immaculate. Our surveys are answered 100%, weighted to perfection. They're representative of the population. What happens? What's the overall impact on the business as a result of this?
So I don't think that ever will really happen. I would love for it to happen because that means that we can focus on other things. But I guess it means that businesses will have more reliable data to inform their business decisions. And at the end of the day, that's all what we're trying to do in market research, right? Is have good quality, clean data to help inform our recommendations to our clients. So if you figure out a solution to our problem, let me know. I'll come work for you.
Sure thing. Okay, so if I can quickly recap what we've talked about today. So sample quality, it is an endemic, become endemic across the industry. You mentioned that B2B suffers from this the most, but obviously B2C prone to it as well. It is a significant issue. A number of things that haven't or aren't as sufficient anymore, like the double opt-in, for instance. Self-selection is an issue. We really need to have buttoned up screeners to help us to weed out bad actors. Custom recruitment is a tool that can be used. You mentioned that phone interviewing is back, which is great. And I had someone earlier on the podcast as well with field work. In person is back as well. So there's a whole lot of new, or not new, but existing collection tools that people can use again. We talked about how some people could be cleaning up to 80% of their sample, which is quite scary to think about the value which they could be missing out on by doing such things. You talked about how we need to get our surveys shorter. We need to be device agnostic with our tools. And also using multiple recruitment methods as well to make sure we're not just focusing on those prolific online people. So there's obviously a big part of the population which can be reached in person. We talked about some of the things to help improve the quality of our samples, such as working on the recruitment methods themselves, using technology, such as geolocation, language, IP addresses, to help kick people out or confirm people before they enter. Using pre-screeners is also a big part of things. We talked about also from the design phase, using things such as refusals, questioning design flaws, falsehoods, social desirability, giving politically correct responses rather than their true opinions. We talked about briefly on the screening phase, we looked into some things we can do in real time as well. So developing consistent and efficient, accurate data checks, confirming knowledge respondents, confirming attentive respondents, but not being too aggressive with that. And then we looked at your 4 or so different things, such as speeders, open-end reviews, straight lining, red herrings. You also talked about numeric outliers and contradictory and probable responses as well. And then we just had a quick little imagine if we were to get everything right in the sample space, as improbable as it may be, but it's still a great North Star to aim for. And yes, exciting to see if we ever get there, or at least how close we can. Anyway, absolutely. Anything that I missed or you want to add before we wrap?
So I think we talked a lot about B2B and niche B2B, but I don't want to forget about consumer sample either. B2B is just a little bit more near and dear to my heart, but I definitely think that there's issues across both B2B and B2C. Again, at the end of the day, I think regardless of whether the audience is B2C or B2B, my recommendations remain the same. Make your surveys simpler, shorter, device agnostic, make them fun. I think gamification is a really interesting direction that our consumer surveys are going in. It almost doesn't feel like a survey, but you still get amazing insights out of it. So yeah, maybe your next podcast can be about B2C sample quality.
Well, do you have a short example of gamification that you've seen work really well?
Ooh, that's really hard. That's really hard. I've been away from that for a little bit, but maybe this isn't gamification, but it mimics kind of a real life scenario. So like if you're walking into a restaurant and you want to, order something on the menu, there's this thing called menu-based conjoint that we actually do quite a bit. And it doesn't apply just to restaurants. You can do it with a lot of things, but restaurants just comes to mind. And we designed the conjoint as if you were walking into a restaurant and looking directly at the menu board. So the look and feel is exactly the same. So instead of just talking to someone, which actually, now that I think about it, a lot of even QSR restaurants, you can just go inside and punch some things on a screen and order your food. I think those are the fun things for respondents, is really mimicking this like real life scenario of being in there in the moment, exactly like you're placing an order. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You're very welcome. Thanks to everyone else for listening in. If you have enjoyed what you've listened to, then feel free to reach out to Lynn. You can find her on LinkedIn. So a big thanks for joining us on the show today, Lynn.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome. For the listeners out there, if you've liked what you listened to, feel free to reach out to Lynn on LinkedIn. We'd also appreciate if you subscribe to the podcast, shared this with others, or even left a review. So thanks for listening to Now That's Significant.